it tends to be a left-wing trope that the poor should be well served and also that the environment should be well served. The problem is, or a problem is that those two desires now run into conflict with one another. And my sense is that the left, the radical left, is pretty willing to sacrifice the poor to the planet, ineffectively too, because this has happened in Germany, where the Greens have taken control, and Germany is deindustrializing, and Germany actually pollutes more per kilowatt of energy produced now under the green regimes than it did before under more pure capitalism. The point I'm making here, and this is relevant for the international audience that might be watching this, is that British Columbia is very resource rich. And as you pointed out, it's a very important port. And Canada has a lot of low cost raw materials, especially on the energy side, but not only on the energy side, that could be brought to people all around the world to alleviate their poverty. And it's very counterproductive to make it more difficult for people to live, not least because they don't take a long-term view of the future then and aren't likely to be concerned in their own localities with environmental issues. So my sense is British Columbia and Canada could do a great job, especially on the energy side, of getting natural gas in particular off to markets all around the world. And British Columbia controls that in a large degree.
You're absolutely right. I mean, I think it was over the last, I don't know how many decades, 2.4 billion people have been lifted out of abject poverty because of affordable energy. And obviously, Canada has a tremendous amount of energy. British Columbia has a tremendous amount of gas. There's 1 billion people in the world today that do not have electricity. I think it's somewhere between 400 and 600 million people that only have enough electricity to run a refrigerator. I mean, and those countries want to be able to have a quality of life. We have the resources and the ability to be able to take the resources we have and export them and use that for the benefit of our own people, to be able to improve our quality of life, but at the same time, be a real global player in terms of helping these other countries. And so it's something that has always puzzled me in terms of why the left does not want to do this. Do they not care about the people in other parts of the world? Do they not care about the quality of life of the people in our own province? By taking advantage of these resources, by providing that revenue to us and providing those resources to other countries, we're not only improving our quality of life, but we are playing our part in the globe, making sure that other people have that quality of life. And as you know, as people have more energy, as people have that higher quality of life, they care more about the environment. Yeah. They actually do more for the environment than they can otherwise. And so, we can play a big role in that. But like I say, it's just our policies seem to be blocking us from being able to be a major player.
Well, and the Chinese are building coal-fired plants like mad, and Canada has plenty of coal, but we also have plenty of liquid natural gas, which is a good replacement for coal. I mean, it looks to me like countries that are industrializing, and they're doing that because they want to live longer, more productive, and more opportunity-rich lives, just like we did. They go through a relatively predictable sequence in terms of energy development, and perhaps it starts with wood and peat and that sort of thing, biomass, which is very polluting and not very efficient and hard on the forests and terrible for indoor pollution. And they transition to coal, which is much better in all regards than ordinary biomass, and then let's say to natural gas and oil, and then potentially, if we weren't completely stupid about that, to something approximating nuclear. And so the succession of improvement on the efficiency and cost front in the energy world seems clear. And it is a mystery that isn't an accepted principle on the left, and it's really shocked me, because one of the things I've seen over the last 10 years is every single time I've watched this in every Western country, when the left has the choice between worshiping at the feet of the environment and in a stunningly counterproductive manner, or serving the poor, they always serve the environment. And my sense is that that's a consequence of likely an anti-human and Malthusian ethos that emerged in the 1960s with claims by Paul Ehrlich and others, biologists mostly, that the world was by necessity a place of finite resources, that we would be running short of everything by the year 2000, that the planet can't support more than a couple of 100 million people at anything approximating the standard of living we have in the West. And that anti-human ethos seems to have dominated the thinking of the left, much to the terror and hardship of the poor. I've been following this guy online named Jasper Manchugo, and he's an African and a subsistence farmer, but he's quite literate when it comes to the use of social media. And he posts continually showing how much work he and his family have to do to scratch out a living without fossil fuels, trying to subsistence farm, and to show that that's not the romantic dream of, what would you say, noble savage living that seems to possess the idiot Rousseauians of the left, but a terrible hardship for him and everyone around him. And he is trying to bring to public attention the fact that the world desperately needs, well, not least the fossil fuels that Canada can provide. And Alberta wants to do that, obviously. Alberta is the most, for everybody listening who don't know, Alberta is a very fossil fuel rich province, but it's landlocked. It's right next to British Columbia. And Canada's had a hell of a time getting its act together with regards to the export of, well, natural gas in particular.
Yeah, I know that there's no question in my mind, those natural resources, those hydrocarbons could do a lot to lift up the people in many places around the world. But more importantly in that, you mentioned farming in Africa and that side of things. There seems to be this bent by populations around the world, governments around the world, that they want to stop the use of nitrogen-based fertilizer. For nitrogen-based fertilizer, I'm sure you know Norman Borlaug, I think his name was, who received the Nobel Prize for his work on what was called the Green Revolution, right? The massive increase in agricultural productivity because of nitrogen-based fertilizer, artificial fertilizers, as well as water management and better land management. And I just think of it, and now we want to go backwards. I mean, 40% of the world's food supply comes from using nitrogen-based fertilizer. So if you're going to stop using that, and of course you need hydrocarbons for that, you need natural gas for the feedstock, you're talking about significant amount of shortage of food, people starving.
Which has already happened.
And I'm sorry, I'm not up for that. I mean,
no.
That is not the way we should be as a world, right? We should actually be trying to do everything we can to improve the lives and to be able to provide those goods. And I just look at British Columbia as well, and from an agriculture perspective, we only procure 34% of the food we consume from BC. 2/3 of the food that we need comes from outside our borders. Now, we produce lots of cows, calves, and send them off for finishing. We produce lots of wine and these types of things for export. But the basics, we're not meeting the needs of our own population. And so if you've got these governments around the world that are talking about reducing food production, it leaves our population vulnerable. And so this was actually the reason I was kicked out of my former political party, because I started looking at this saying, wait a second, this is not right. We as a government should be putting the priority of looking after our own people, making sure that we meet their basic needs. And similarly, we should take a role, nationally, internationally, making sure that other people can look after themselves as well. It's just the right thing to do. And yet you're right. The left seems to be hell-bent on this ideology that probably, like I say, probably rooted out of the 60s that just seems to be carrying forward.
It's the most humanitarian policies possible. It seems to me it's pretty straightforward. It's cheap energy and cheap food. If you have cheap energy and cheap food, you don't have poor people. And then the additional benefit, as we already pointed out, is that as soon as people aren't scrabbling around in the muck for their next meal, they can start to take something approximating a multi-generational perspective. And that is what people do. I mean, part of the reason that we live so long is because as grandparents, we also help care for children. Like, human beings are wired to take a longer view if they can. But if you're desperately poor, you default to what is necessary right now. And that's often agricultural practices and so forth that aren't sustainable over the long run. And so, I figured this out about 15 years ago, that we could all have our cake and eat it too. If we used our energy resources wisely, if we knocked energy costs down, which should be a primary goal of politicians at every level of analysis, regardless of political party, if we knocked our energy costs down, we could eradicate poverty worldwide, and we could feed everybody, and then everybody would start taking care of their environment locally. Which seems like an optimal, it borders on, the alternative policies, in my estimation, border on genocidal. And I know already that the fact that energy costs have spiraled upwards is putting tremendous mortal pressure on the poorest people all around the world. You can see too in Canada, grocery prices have gone up so much that it's actually hard to believe.